Hello and welcome. We will be waiting an extra 2 minutes for any additional guests to arrive, and then we will begin. Again, welcome to the August installment of our Post-Secondary Pathway series hosted by the Hunt Institute. I am Dr. Waverly Wissenant, Deputy Director of Higher Education at the Hunt Institute. The Hunt Institute is a national nonprofit dedicated to supporting and advising education leaders and policymakers nationwide on education issues across the education continuum. Today, we have 3 experts from around the country who will help us frame the topic of data-informed decision-making. Our first research expert is Dr. Skip Crooker from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Our second research expert is Cara Reddish from North Carolina State University, and our moderator is Leah Burton from SAS. In today's rapidly evolving educational landscape, institutions are increasingly recognizing the importance of harnessing data to drive strategic decision-making processes. From student success initiatives to resource allocation and beyond, data analytics has the potential to revolutionize the way universities operate, ensuring they stay agile and responsive to the needs of students and stakeholders. From predicting enrollment trends to enhancing teaching methodologies and supporting student retention efforts, we will examine real-world examples of how data analytics is being leveraged to drive positive outcomes across various aspects of academia. To support this discussion, we have 2 resource experts and a moderator from SAS. Let me introduce our moderator, Leah Burton. Leah Burton began her role as a principal higher education industry consultant in the SAS education practice in 2022. Prior, she spent 22 years at North Carolina State University, building the award-winning Centennial Campus, launching the Industry Partnership Office, and contributing to the university's world-renowned stature as an innovative and engaged public university. In her current capacity, she strives to inspire continued evolution in higher education through dedication to data, analytics, and AI. Leah, thank you so much for being here with us today. I am now going to pass the moderatorship over to Leah. Thank you again.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Waverly. And good afternoon, everyone. We're glad that you're able to join us. I'd like to introduce one of our panelists, Dr. Skip Crooker. He is the Vice Provost for Decision Support at University of Nevada in Las Vegas. Dr. Crooker shapes evidence-based policies and strategic initiatives that prioritize effective leadership. Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Crooker. We appreciate it. And so actually today I'd like to start with you, Dr. Crooker, and we're really just going to jump right in to some hard questions right away, in my mind anyway. I wonder today if you can give us an idea for what ethical considerations you find yourself encountering, but more importantly, should be considered by all of us when we are collecting or analyzing and utilizing student data for decision making.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, yeah, right to the tough one that we face, certainly when we're dealing with data and sensitive data and on our applications, right, we ask for personally identifiable information, and so as we get that data, certainly we have a responsibility to protect it. At the same time, we know that not all groups are as successful as other groups, and so this kind of requires that need to go ahead and to disaggregate and then use in our modeling to predict, what are the factors that are associated with student success, and then too, these factors can even vary across the different student groups. So thinking about UNLV, so University of Nevada, Las Vegas, we are a majority minority institution, so more than 71% of our students are minority. Nationally, we know that more than 50%, so more than half, I think the last statistic I saw was about 54% of undergraduates nationally are first generation. And at our institution, 46% are Pell recipients. And the national average is of undergraduates, about 34%. So what this means is there's a lot of, there's some income disparities among our undergraduate students. And so that creates some challenges to that student success. And so if we're going to be able to close those gaps, then certainly we have to think about strategies to address that. And I know that that'll come up again, and we'll spend some more time on. But it becomes so easy in this digital world to share that data out, right? To attach it to an email and send. And of course, that's not the best way to do it if we're going to protect that data. And so really it necessitates having that data in our data in a data ecosystem so that we can control the permissions to have access to that data and really think about that need. So that arises, so that need for data privacy, at the same time being informed about how different characteristics of our students might influence that success, and then ultimately to be able to measure that success are certainly things that I would think of first.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Dr. Crooker. I'd love to turn to you now, Cara, and let me introduce Cara Reddish first. She is an institutional research analyst at North Carolina State University. She's passionate about improving the student experience in higher education and advocates for actionable changes that enhance student experiences through data. Additionally, Cara was a Belk Center research intern. Thank you for joining us today, Cara. Can you tell us a little bit about how data analytics can be integrated into your institutional planning? You're dealing at an institutional level, not a department or a college level. Tell us how that can be integrated into the institutional planning processes throughout to support long-term strategic goals and objectives.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for that warm introduction. Yeah, so just to start off, I would just say that data analytics should be integrated into the institutional planning process, essentially as a key business asset. In general, utilizing data analytics can help highlight a large range of insights about an institution. And when institutions are setting these long-term strategic goals, they often, craft them using, broad language relating to like the mission, the vision, and values of that institution. So data analytics can help generate insights relating to the decisions and actions institutions make to support the strategic goals and objectives that they have created. An example could be like an institution can examine their enrollment numbers utilizing data at the end of their long-term strategic planning cycle. And once they examine the trends in the data, they can see that, for example, that enrollment numbers of students from rural counties or high schools could have decreased in the past few years. And ultimately, this discovery utilizing data can then prompt the questions of, what factors are contributing to this decrease? Because obviously this is not ideal. And ultimately, how can we improve upon this? How can we grow these enrollment numbers? And then once you take a deeper dive past those descriptive statistics and also potentially involve campus stakeholders in figuring out the potential factors that has led to this decrease, institutions can then set new strategic efforts to increase the enrollment of students from rural populations within like the next 5 to 10 years. And ultimately, this issue would not have been solved or like found out if data and analytics were not used in the planning process. So that's why it's really important that it is used, of course. But then once the strategic goals and objectives have been created, it's really important that data analytics is continued to be used, and it's very important because ultimately this will help understand and just keep track of the progress that has been made in achieving these goals through different data deliverables. This can look like a mixture of creating different public and private reports and dashboards that can be used to, make sure that everyone's understanding of the progress that's been made. And then ultimately, though, to integrate data analytics in this large, complicated process effectively, it really is important to have a unit with a clear centralized ownership of data analytics. Since institutional data and analytics is, again, an important business asset, it really is important to protect it and regulate it. This just basically ensures that, all the roles and responsibilities with handling institutional data remains clear and consistent across the board. And then ultimately, as a result, data quality, data access, and reporting can remain consistent. New resources can be created easily and effectively, ultimately to help support the goal of institutional planning and help, achieve those long-term strategic goals from an institution.
Can you expand on that a little bit of having, the centralized group responsible for data and analytics, and how then you expand the vision of, the goals and where the institution is in terms of meeting those goals, or maybe the need to course correct? Can you expand upon and describe how you see that happening either at your institution or even at others, so that you can get the fullness of the institution involved?
Yeah, at our institution, the office I work at, institutional strategy and analysis, and also other institutions as a whole, just having a centralized institutional research office can really help centralize data analytics across the institution, because I have, noticed that there are institutions that might not have a regulated system to keep track of how data is reported, how data is protected. So it's really important that, with different SOPs and different standards of just operating in general, it is established. So then that centralized office, whatever that looks like, can then be that central point for institutional leaders and leadership of the institution, that they can come and they can ask those hard questions. They can see just the basis of that performance data that they don't really have the time to really analyze and take a deep dive. But having that centralized office that can do that work will be really important, so that they can have just a more breadth of knowledge that can be given to leaders to then also support, those strategic goals, and knowing when the pivot, when something is happening, being okay, this could be it. This could be the reason. Let's, shift from there. And it just helps make the process more effective overall, instead of it just being one, just on a basis level of just basic, and not really getting to the breadth of issues at hand and how we can better solve those issues.
Yeah. Dr. Crooker, I wonder if I can go back to you and ask you to expand upon, the issue of ethics in your practice, and how that has changed over the last 5 and 10 years. I know I look at it very differently from when I was a student. Now I have kids who are college students, and I worked at a university. So, I mean, there's a lot of different perspectives here, but you certainly have been in this space for a duration such that you've been able to see how those viewpoints have changed. Can you share that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And so I guess you know what I would focus on is just really the growth and the ability for us to accumulate data, right?
Mm,
And so
mhm,
that has certainly expanded. There was a time before we had servers and could take and digitize all this information, which and of
mhm,
course this data can hang around for so much longer. And the other thinking about the ethical dimension, I would just go back to as a public institution, we're about social mobility and advancing our students. And I really feel like we have a responsibility for our Nevadans that to first off be accessible, and so to be able to provide that education that's going to deliver that advancement. And so that's probably in a nutshell, that's why I'm in
mhm,
higher education. I came from a rural area of Missouri, and
mhm.
I said, well, I'll give college a try, not really knowing, I didn't know that graduate school existed, that was a possibility. And so but I had professors and faculty that reached out to me and encouraged me, and it's worked out very well for me. And
Mhm,
so it's that opportunity to give back. And when I talk about this with my colleagues, so many say essentially the same thing, that service. And so that's important to us. That's in our DNA, in our campus, and that's a good thing, right? And so I think that's the that's the proper ethics. It's not that, oh, we're not trying to make a profit. If we're trying to make a profit, higher ed does a horrible job in the public sector,
Truly.
right? We know in terms of where those budgets come from, that and so that's a challenge, and I think that's a part of the responsibility, that we deliver that value, but then we have to be efficient at doing it,
Mhm,
because that cost goes back on the taxpayers and certainly the students themselves, in terms of tuition. And so and again, I would align that, then the extra dimension that means for my office really does mean that security of that information.
mhm.
There are questions that are being asked now that are much more, that much more evasive, much more in your private sphere than any question I had to answer, right, whenever I was
Yeah.
applying. And so certainly if students are sharing this information with us, they rightly have an expectation that that information is going to be protected. And so that is something that that we're working with right now to make sure that we're able to keep that secure. And that goes right to our data procedures and certainly whom we're giving access. So those are the ethical dimension that I guess that I would highlight.
Yeah. Well, let's continue on that topic about mobility. And one of the topics that we could discuss is the barrier to attainment for incarcerated or formerly incarcerated individuals, which include a lack of in prison college programs. And so I wonder if both of you in turn can give us some idea of what you believe the key barriers to post-secondary education success, for individuals who would find themselves incarcerated or formerly such, through to the spectrum, and how both of your institutions and policy makers are looking to correct those barriers. Cara, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say one main barrier, of course, is, affordability of it. I think a lot of, formerly incarcerated and also formerly incarcerated individuals oftentimes don't have access to a lot of things in financial aid, like Pell Grants and just federal student loans in general, just because of how, the law has been written so far. I think how institutions and policymakers can help with that, though, I would say just helping, again, forming different financial literacy programs for these individuals, so they can understand, one, like the financial barriers that they likely might face, and also other possible different ways you can fund your education. And maybe it might look differently. Of course, it might look differently from like a standard student's experience who hasn't had that experience being incarcerated. But I would say institutions can just also help whenever you do have an incarcerated or formerly incarcerated student in your programs, making sure you just do a really good job with controlling costs by maintaining like efficiencies and helping these students have adequate resources at the university that they can use to help graduate on time for whatever major that they have. And then also policymakers have a big role in this, of course, in making sure that they prioritize securing funding and creating policies to show people that, it is a priority that, we help all people, help get to post-secondary education, regardless of they've been incarcerated or not, and just creating policies that can remove those financial barriers in general like that. And then also can help fund institutions create more resources and have adequate staffing, adequate funding to help these incarcerated and formerly incarcerated students. So that was my first thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Cara. Dr. Crooker.
Yeah, thank you. So this is important, certainly, and definitely can see the ethical component of economic mobility, and so many times, right? What we want to do is kind of stop this loop, and we know that, and probably the United States, right? If you check the literature, we have kind of that highest reoccurrence of incarceration for those that may have been incarcerated. So we had to stop that loop. Of course, it's a challenge if our labor markets penalize that and make it more difficult to hire. When I was teaching, and this was a different institution, so I've been at 4 higher ed institutions, but I did have a student that had previously been incarcerated and then studying to get an undergraduate degree. And I know that one of his challenges, and I didn't know this about him until as he was getting to finish and starting to go out onto the job market. And at that time anyway, and so it's been probably a decade or so, and so I'm not sure if it's exactly the same, but he really had a challenge of being able to get a position, to be able to interview for a position because of that prior incarceration. And so it really brought it home to me, the challenges that population can have, because you can see how that cycle can get going, because you don't have the same labor market outcomes. And so if we think about Gary Becker's work, some of the seminal work that he had done on crime occurrence, and so certainly as those economic opportunities are diminished, then you really don't have those that same availability for mobility that that other Americans have, and so that is certainly something that we have to reflect on and really make sure that we understand and build into our policies. And I'm not sure that we do that, right? I don't think that we're thinking about that dimension, or at least at that time, given the challenges that I know that my own student had run into. And then, so Kara talked about affordability and thinking about a student that may have spent some time outside of higher education or outside of education. Some of those skills deteriorate if you spend some time outside of the classroom. And so that readiness aspect, you might not remember that algebra class that you took back in high school. And if you had that gap, then so kind of getting those skills sharpened to go back into the classroom, and even writing, right, can certainly be a challenge. And so I think what I think our institutions are doing today to help with that would be increasing flexibility in terms of, even something as simple maybe as tutoring services. But because of technology, so like this Zoom session, right? We've found that, hey, you can do tutoring sessions through Zoom. And what we found for our students and even for our tutors is that they'll tutor more hours, right? If they can do that from home, and if they're more flexible on the time, rather than saying, oh, it has to be between 8 and 5 in the library. Well, that's much more of a challenge. And so finding those opportunities to drive down the cost of delivering some of those university services, I think is an example of how we can chip at that barrier.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And you're right. I don't hear university leadership talking about some of these issues as much as I do hear governors, for instance, or legislators talking about those. So maybe there's some change to be had there. Well, I want to turn to a question here from one of our attendees, and it is this. I have a question about how we communicate with leaders on our campus and set leaders up to successfully use our data and analyses in their decision making. What are some tips and lessons you've learned about how to most effectively communicate information, insights, analysis with campus leaders in order to better facilitate data-informed decision making? Who would like to take that first?
Well, I certainly can if I'm quicker to the buzzer, if that works.
Yeah, go on ahead, Dr. Crooker.
Yeah, so this is an excellent question, and this definitely comes up, and certainly I think I live it, right? And so I think my strategy has been, and um so an issue with thinking about provost and deans and presidents and even department chairs is they don't have a lot of time. And so if I would go and drop a report or send them a PDF, they probably don't have time to read it. And so what I've learned to do is really have an executive summary, and really, in a paragraph or so, why is this important? And then share that with my leadership, and then be ready with the analysis for their follow-up questions whenever they're able to see, oh, yeah, this is actually really, this is really important. And so that's been my stance. And I once had a provost, not the current provost. I've been at 4 institutions, but I once had a provost that said, Skip, you can't use equations. So I had to stop using equations and what, but as I got the picture, summarize, why is it important? And then too, how can that impact policy? What does that mean we can change? And then when you have that opportunity then to have a conversation with your student success leader. So that would be my first advice.
Cara, anything to add there?
Yeah, I will also add to just really understand who you're talking to and the language that they speak. I think that also goes into just getting to know who these leaders are and what they care about and what they're passionate about. You can tell it from like a personal level, but also again from like their strategic goals and plans that they have set. Really understand what is important to them, and then as you're writing these reports and everything like that, highlight what you know they're going to care about. So again, that's also going back into, building relationships, understanding how they work, how they prefer to receive their information, and making sure you follow that. So then you catch their eye, and then then you can also get to like the other things too that might not necessarily catch their eye, but once you grab them, then you have them pretty much. So then you can just sync them into all the other information that you want to share with them, and then help them with that data-informed decision-making process.
Thank you, Cara. And Matt, did that answer your question? If you have something follow on, feel free to put that in the Q&A. Nope, he says great. Thank you both. All right, another question from a participant. How can data analysis assist in identifying at-risk students early on to provide timely interventions and support? Cara, you want to take that first?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say how data can help, identify those at-risk students early is definitely, again, having a good data system within your institution that can, track how retention rates and track like how students are performing with their grades and everything of that nature. And then if you have like some form of system that can then like flag students who might not have like satisfactory grades and like those basic level courses, you can then implement like a team or something like that to then reach out to those students directly, see, okay, like what's the issue? Do you need help? Send them to like different resources you have on campus, and just give them the support that they need to help them, figure out how to, get through the challenging times as well, but also from like that's just from like a course level, but also from like a financial standpoint too. Like if you see that, there are students who have outstanding balances, again, having a system, with data and like things like that can like detect like, okay, there's some students who are like, have outstanding balances, and then having that system then check in with those students saying like, hey, what's going on? Send them to different resources that you might have on campus, like emergency funding and something like that, that can also help them not be at risk in that moment and give them the resources that they need.
Dr. Crooker, how would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, and so so I almost thought someone was reading my notes here or my to-do list. I mean, this is definitely something that we are actively working on and building, and I would say because we've learned with previous initiatives. One of the things that's complicated when you bring a freshman cohort in, obviously you have information on their academic profile at that time. But then if you wait until that next data point in terms of grades rolling, it's the end of December. The analysis that I've done is essentially the die's cast. The GPA, the scholarships might be blown by that time if you're waiting to intervene. And so we try to be much more proactive. And what we're learning to do is to integrate our learning management system data and even just doing simple things. So not necessarily getting into the grade book, but just a simple thing like how many times does a student hit their Canvas portal? And then how does that compare to others enrolled in that class? And and what we find is, and looking at our historic learning management system data, we have a class of students, we have a group of students that never touch Canvas, that never touched the LMS at all. And their success rate is very poor. And so it's, hey, maybe there's something about that learning management system that they don't know. Maybe I think a lot of times our faculty assume that students
Yeah.
can just do it, and that's a bad assumption. And so we've learned to do that in that orientation week before the semester. Hey, make sure everyone knows how to get into their learning management system portal. And hey, this is where faculty are going to put homeworks and solution guides and things like this. And so this is something to be familiar with. And by the way, that pool of students that never touched the LMS dropped by 75% that first year we implemented that. And so we
Wow.
think, that can be a powerful factor on their success. But then too, we monitor this, right? And so now we pull this data in and we take a look at it on a weekly basis. And so do we see any students that fall? That would signal to us some disengagement. And so then that's something that we want to react to, make sure academic advisors are aware of, and the support team. And to do the reach out and hey, are you having problems with your math classes or English classes? We have writing centers, we have math centers that can help with that. So those are some things that we've done with students that that are at risk, and then thinking about maybe the more earlier measures of at risk were much coarse and just that academic profile coming in, but we've tried to update that with new information as they're interacting with our campus. The other thing I would say is that we found great success with students that are engaged in registered student organizations. So their success rate goes up a lot when we find that when they're participating. We think that's all about that engagement with college.
Can you expand on that by exploring a little bit of how your office and maybe other colleagues throughout the university decide where to draw the lines of what information you are analyzing, and then what you are sharing with professors maybe or others, and what you're not. I think that's a helpful dialogue to talk about where to draw those lines.
Yeah, and so so that's a really good question, and so for us in decision support, a lot of times we create the dashboards of the reports that we send over to our student success team. I'm actually not sure what they might reach out and share with the faculty. I'm not sure really that they do include the faculty, but rather the academic advisors and then the student coaches. And many times it's not telling them, hey, this is what triggered the alert. So again, that's that data privacy.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily know what the situation is, but rather they reach out and here's a service that's available to you. It's open to all our UNLV students, but we actually, we'll push it right whenever we see students that, that trip these risk flags. And so just proactively make sure, send that extra communication, or even invite them in, or make their advisor aware, hey, please reach out to this student. And so it's from that normal communication channel. And so the student doesn't necessarily feel like they're being signaled out. And so I would say we've learned to do that, right? Don't call groups like recovery team or something like that, because the students will perceive, they don't think I'm going to make it. And so you have to be careful with that messaging.
Yeah. Car, do you have a similar experience at NC State University in terms of drawing the line and where and how you share data to to the benefit of student achievement?
Yeah, I would say, there is, that moment where like there is, data that at a certain point you do have to of course keep it like confidential and like not share it out. But then of course when it is time to share it out, We definitely do that. We definitely have systems in place, different dashboards and everything like that, that can also
Mhm.
highlight how students are doing, highlight all the other great initiatives that NC State has right now in propelling like the different goals and like how students are succeeding, and also backing up, how well our students are doing, like in classes, how are they being successful in like graduating rates and everything of that nature. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you both for that. I appreciate it. Um, Another attendee has asked the following question: in what ways can data be leveraged to enhance curriculum development and instructional design to meet the evolving needs of students and industry? So this gets both sides, the student achievement, but also workforce readiness, which, of course, is the both things are the center of so much discussion now. Who'd like to start there?
I can kick us off.
Sure.
I would say data can be leveraged to, enhance curriculum development and instructional design, in the sense of also just making sure, asking students in general, like, are like from the courses that you have taken, do you feel like this has helped like prepare you for your industry that you're going in? So that can look like asking students, from like having a graduating survey, asking the students, hey, do you feel like you've gotten the information that you need, the skills you need for your industries? And if the answer is majority yes, then great, you're doing a great job. If you are getting no's and you're getting some feedback on it, then you can take that back to you know, departments and saying, hey, students are feeling like they are not being prepared with different skill levels that they need in their different industries, right? So then utilizing that student feedback, and then also doing some research on the different needs of the growing needs of all these industries, then reworking your curriculum and reworking your instructional design to be like, okay, how can we get to the point where students are getting the skills that they need? Because I will say, I feel like oftentimes, um, in the coursework and everything, like you get a lot of those technical skills, but we're learning that, especially like with the growth of like AI and a lot of online tools, that, in some way, shape, or form, someone could argue like you might not need these technical skills
Yeah.
as much. But what students are lacking a lot of is those personal skills, or those like communication skills and everything like that. So understanding if students are feeling like there are gaps in that, utilizing research, utilizing that data to then rework it and like find different ways students can improve in those skills, whether that's adding different courses to their curriculum and their degree track, or just tweaking adding some different assignments with different focuses in each class, just so that students can leave the institution well-rounded and have the skills that they need in general for all the career paths that they can take.
Yeah. Do you does your office, Cara, get involved in skills mapping between jobs that are available or in growing need within your state, for instance, and the skills being taught at different programs within your university? Do you get involved in that type of data matching?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not on the potential team that would be helping with
Mhm.
that. So I'm not exactly sure if, we actually directly map with that, but
Mhm.
I wouldn't be shocked if that is occurring, but I'm just not like fully knowledgeable of that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you can't know all the things in through the entire institution. I learned that for sure. Dr. Crooker, would
Yeah.
you like to add to that answer? And indeed, also, are those in your office involved in mapping skills needed within your state to those being taught at your institution?
Yeah, let's see. So, and let me start by talking about leveraging the data, and because around that curriculum process, because I do think that there's lots to gain for that, and what the gain is that ability to shrink for the student time to degree completion. And the term that arises is this curricular complexity, right? So so how complex are our curriculums. And what we found when we investigated this is that yeah, it was really hard for a student to be progressing normally and be able to finish a degree on time because of the sequence of because of the prerequisite courses, and then their availability. And so, and I really, of course, I can remember students that would come up to me, and I teach a senior level statistics class, and and generally, senior level, so I'm expecting these students to graduate, and the student would be saying things like, "Oh well," and I would ask them, "So are you graduating? What are you doing after graduation?" And they would say, "Well, actually, I um." I need one more class that's not offered till next spring, and so I'm going to have to wait a year to take that class." And yeah, as a former department chair, I was like, "No, wait, no, you need to go and speak with your advisor. You need to go and talk with the chair. You need to find the substitute." But the reason that that happens is that the curriculum isn't really woven with what students are actually doing in terms of the sequence of classes that they're taking. And the faculty don't necessarily know this until you share that data with them. And so certainly building out the curriculum maps, which most people do, and what that sequence of courses is, and just make sure that that's possible. And keep in mind, if a student gaps, to have a 2-year cycle on a class, particularly upper level class, isn't isn't going to work, right?
Yeah.
Because life happens. Life is a four-letter word, and so we have to think about that. The other thing I would say with leveraging the data is that do this empirically. Take those like math classes, let's say, if they take in a sequence, and look at how students are performing. So, what's the probability of passing a class if they get a C? And communicate that with your faculty, that next class or that third class, and just really work backward and make sure that students are getting the success they need in those classes to be prepared for those subsequent classes. And if you haven't done that analytics, you don't know. And what we've found is that we've needed to go back and do redesign for those course sequences to ensure that we were setting the students up to be successful in the subsequent classes and to take it one time, right? And to be able to pass. So that would be what I would highlight. And definitely you're right to make sure that that's ultimately with the labor force and the skills they need. And so I think having a good a lot of academic programs will have advisors, and a lot of times these are alumni from that program, and so they're able to give that feedback back to the faculty in terms of, hey, you need to expand classes here, or things like that. And so I would say those become good resources, and certainly as Kara was suggesting.
I was at a community college recently, just a couple or 3 weeks ago, where I learned that students at that community college who register for classes less than 4 weeks before the start of classes have less than a 50% chance of passing those classes. And so, when a university knows that, or a community college knows that, it's certainly incumbent upon them to begin analyzing how that can be changed, right? And not to continue that trend. That's not to say, I mean, it was less than 50%. So I mean, that means that, some are going to pass that class, but certainly the track record is not good, within that window of time. And so I think that that's an example of those things that become obvious to a department like yours within a university or a community college. And then, then the question is, how do we cue this up, for improvement within the institution? Yeah. So, one of the topics that has become so important over these last couple of years certainly is enrollment trends. And, just yesterday there was news of, additional universities that are experiencing real enrollment declines. And so can the both of you explore for us how data analytics can help in predicting student enrollment trends, and then how you adjust resource allocation accordingly to that analysis. Carl, I'll ask you to weigh in on that first.
Yeah, I would think one way to go about it would be definitely creating some predictive models, utilizing data analytics. In this way, having just a model in general can really help. Again, that can just help predict like how the growth that student enrollment or decline student enrollment can have. I think also in general, also having knowledge of like everything else that's going along around like your institution in general, having that general knowledge as well is helpful. And then adjusting those resources accordingly. So if you see that, there are students going in, the enrollment for like college education might be going down, but like, let's say there's like a college of engineering and those enrollment numbers are going up. I wouldn't say necessarily take away funding from any from any college that is experiencing like a decrease, because then you're not supporting students that are still there, but also recognizing the fact that if you are seeing growth, making sure that you are making sure you have the resources needed to support those students, because growth is great, but if you don't support those students, then it's not helpful. They're not going to be able to succeed. They're not going to be able to do well. So definitely having those predictive models is very important, that I would say.
Yeah, agreed. Dr. Crooker, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, thank you. And I know a resource that I use and publicly available is elementary and secondary education. So it's part of the NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics, and they have populations by grade level in the states, and you can get down to the county level. And so I use this in some of our analytics and projecting out what the college going rate size is going to be. And the nice thing about doing that, right? So with the model, and so we know kindergarten, and so you can project out, for another 12 years. And certainly when you do that nationally, not a lot of good news. I think a little bit better for us in the West. So our populations are more stable and even some growth. But yeah, I would encourage people to do that, and if you draw from particular counties, and that you'll be able to kind of see what that's likely to be for the next decade or so as a starting place. And then I think that where you can use that too is also to map out, well, what is your yield rate from these various counties, and are there some counties where you're not growing as much? Those become opportunities, right, for you to grow, particularly if they're kind of close to home. We still get a very large fraction of our students to kind of right out of the back door, so to speak, right? 86% of our students come from Clark County. Of course, it's nice that Clark County has a population over 2 million. So that's still a pretty big pool to draw from. But that's the way, that would be a way I would say that you could use that data, and then too find, where maybe you're not performing, and then that could be signal how to get resources there. And then too, I would like to see us. So my goals over the next 10 years is do a better job of that pass-through rate, right, to increase that success rate for students that are attending, and to close that time to degree. And I think as we do that, they'll start to fix some of the enrollment challenges that we might have as it becomes a better investment for students. So that's how I would approach that.
Thanks, Dr. Crooker. Well, we have just a couple of minutes left, and I have one question from attendee that was directed to you, Cara. And the question is this: as a young professional, what do you see as being the most pressing issues in higher ed, and how can data help to address any of those issues?
Yeah, I love that question actually. I would say the one that comes to mind the most would be the question of the value of higher education. Due to, of course, higher education becoming more expensive, people are questioning, like, do you even need a degree to succeed in your life? And, you know, some may and some may not. But I think utilizing data to tell the stories of why it is important to get these degrees is so vital. Sharing, you know, also it's not even just about getting the degree, it's also the experience that you have while you're in your institution. Sharing the stories of like students and like the outcomes that the students are having, like who experience like high impact practices like internships, co-ops, and just volunteer work or any different honors programs or anything like that, displaying, you know, and sharing like how those student outcomes are better or like more, I guess, more desirable in the sense of like helping with like job attainment, salary, and everything like that can really help
Yeah.
shape the story of like saying like, you know, you might think college isn't helpful, but it really is and really can help like your trajectory in like your career in general. And just sharing out those stories, utilizing data and everything like that would be extremely helpful to help bridge that gap and help people understand the importance of it.
Thanks, Cara. Appreciate that. So we had one question left, and Ryan, I copied your question down, and we'll respond directly to you on that because we need to wrap up here, and I'm going to hand it back to Waverly for some closing remarks. But I want to thank both of our panelists, and this has been a real great session. I think in some ways we're just getting started, so maybe we'll have a chance to continue these conversations. And thank you all for participating. Back over to you, Waverly.
Thank you. And I wish we could keep this conversation going. And Ryan, again, we will get you an answer. Thank you again, Leah, for flagging that for all of us. And thank you, Dr. Crooker, Cara, and Leah for joining us in today's engaging and informative discussion on data decision-making. Before closing today's session, the Hunt Institute is going to share links for our upcoming webinar on leveraging industry partners to increase state-level support for MSIs, which is happening on September 12th. We would love to see all of y'all there. And again, thank you for joining us today. And we also, I think, have 2 other links for some Amazon books that Dr. Crooker suggested would be great reads for us all regarding data-informed decision-making. So thank you again, and Ryan, we will get you that answer shortly.